Toss aside the touchy-feely notions of love in business and recognize the real power it holds. Welcome to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast with host Steve Farber. Drawing on his work with a wide variety of companies from the Fortune 100 to smaller family-owned businesses, Farber shares inspiring interviews with business leaders and proven strategies for how you can create experiences that your customers will love by developing a culture that your employees, teammates, and colleagues love working in. Discover why and how love, at the end of the day, is just damn good business for you too. Here's your host, Steve Farber.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. I am Steve Farber, your host. Thank you for joining me. Today, my guest is my friend Glodean Champion, and I'm not sure where to start to tell you about her and who she is, because she is such an unusual combination of extraordinary talent. So let me start with this. She is a Lean Six Sigma expert. In fact, she is a Six Sigma black belt. For those of you who know anything about business process, etc., you will know what that means. For the rest of you, just know that it's a very meticulous process, training, very rigorous, and she is a black belt, and you know what that means. We should all know what that means. Doesn't mean that she's going to take you down. It just means that she really knows her process stuff. In addition to that, she is a writer. She has a new novel that's just about to come out called Salmon Croquettes. She has a master in fine arts in writing. She is a transformational leader. She's a coach. She's a speaker. She's an educator. She's a storyteller. She's the creator of the Love Method and Kaizen Your Life programs, which provide the tools, strategy, and support to help people create meaningful change in their organization and their lives. And she's also, as it turns out, a certified facilitator of the Extreme Leadership Workshop, which is one of the ways I came to know Glodean. She's also in the process of working on her next book called Tough Love, Shit My Mama Used to Say. You are in for quite a treat, so please join me in my great conversation with Glodean Champion. And wow, what a name. I mean, even a fiction writer would have trouble coming up with one as good as that. In this case, she didn't have to. It's her real name. And she is a champion. Enjoy. Glodean Champion, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you here, my dear.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
There's so much I want to ask you about and talk to you about. Let's start with your story. So, from looking at it from a high level, in your bio, there are two things that come together right from the start. One is this love approach that you're on, and the other is Kaizen and process. And we don't typically see those words kind of mesh together in the same paragraph or sentence.
Right.
And so I'm curious about all of that. And then when you throw into the mix, you've got your new book, a novel coming out soon. I don't know where to start with you. So I want to start with your story. Tell us, not the, from the minute you were born,
right?
Just a high level, your the journey that's brought you to us thus far.
So, although I will say that the beginning of my story is quite interesting, seeing as how I was adopted by a single woman back when they were telling two-parent Black families no. My mom got a yes, but I found out that she was actually part of a program. They had like 30 single Black people that they gave, single Black parents that they gave children to. My mom was one of those 30, but I'm sure that she had something to do with them making the program because she bugged the crap out of them until she got what she wanted. Anyway.
So it was unusual for a single mom to adopt. It was even more unusual for a single Black mom to adopt. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes, very much so. They did this thing called matching. So my mom had to send pictures of her siblings and my grandparents, And then they matched me up with her. So like I do look like I favor my mother's oldest sister. But anyway, which obviously they don't do that anymore because we have got multicultural families.
Sure.
So I grew up with a mom who that's why my next book is called Tough Love, because my mom gave like unconditional love, even though she was really hard on me at times. So I've kind of come up that way. And once I got I feel like my first job was like a love fest because I went through the NAACP had this new careers training and placement center. It was supposed to be a 3-month secretarial, prepare you for work thing. But I had decided halfway through the program, I wasn't going all the way. I was going to get the job when we went on our mock interviews. I was only 17. And they sent me to this CPA firm, Zivitz, Schwartz, and Saltzman. And I interviewed with Hal Zivitz, who was the owner of the company.
And where was that?
In Century City in Los Angeles. And I didn't know anything, okay? Nothing. And we're having the interview and he says, well, can you write shorthand? And I had figured out my own shorthand because I didn't understand the shorthand they were trying to teach us. And he dictated a letter and then I went and typed it up and brought it back to him. And he says, this isn't what I said. And I'm arguing with him because that's exactly what he said. And then he goes, I like you.
So basically you said to him, you're wrong and I'll tell you why.
Yeah. I was like, that's not what you said. You said like this. And then, so anyway, he said, I want to hire you. Can I call your mom? Because you're 17, I got to call your mom. And I said, okay. So I gave him the number. He calls my mom. He's got her on speakerphone. He says, Miss Champion, I'm sitting here with your daughter. She's doing an interview. I want to hire her. The kid's got spunk. And I need to get your permission. And my mom said, why? And he said, because she's underage. And my mom said, okay, are you going to pay her? And he said, yeah. So she was like, yeah, go ahead. And so that kind of got me started in my work life. And I went to the Navy after that and did some other things. And then I quit corporate in 2003.
I went to the Navy, did some other things, blah, blah, blah. Then I quit corporate. So obviously you went from the Navy into the corporate world.
Into the corporate world.
Doing what?
What was that? I don't know. I did odd jobs because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. The companies that I worked for, the only thing that I liked doing in any of them was finding ways to make things better. Like I'd wind up doing things that didn't have anything to do with my job. And then I'd get that job because I'd have created something that needed to be fixed. I didn't know that was a thing though. I just didn't like the jobs that I had because I didn't have a degree. And then my aunt said to me, this was a pivotal moment in my life. My aunt said to me when I was like in my mid-20s, that if I didn't get a degree, I would never make any money. And it was like, what? I'd already been making like more money than somebody my age should have been making. So then it was like, it was a challenge. And so I worked for this shipping company as a secretary. I used to break my computer. Remember DOS and Microsoft Word, Word Perfect?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so Word Perfect, you used to have to type the WP in to get it going. I used to delete it and then call the help desk and see how the guy came to fix it. Because I liked, Carlos was his name. He used to go around everybody's desk. I was like, I like that job, get to talk to people and fix the computer. So I deleted stuff and then watched how he fixed it. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
So you'd sabotage your own computer so you could see how he would fix it, so you could learn how to fix it, so you could do that job. There's a technical term for that. You know what it's called? It's called spunk.
I know. Well, I hated my job. I needed to do something else. So I went home and I took I was married at the time. I took my husband's computer apart a few times. He came home from work one day with the pieces on the floor. It's like, why is my computer in pieces? And I was like, because that's my next job. I got to figure out how to fix it. So I read everything I could read. And then I got a job at the help desk. And 2 years later, I was leading projects, doing computer installations and traveling. I had created this job that I loved. all in IT, hands-on, fixing things. And, they'd give me like the hardest things to fix because I was a girl and that's what they would do, the guys. And then I'd be coming home in tears. And my husband was like, they're making you a better technician. Stop crying about it, which was true. Anyway, long story short, too late, right?
No, good.
Just kidding. And then I had a contract in Wilton, Connecticut, and I was supposed to just be on the project team. And I was hanging around with the smartest guy. I always did that on jobs. Like I found the person that knew the most, and then I kind of partnered up with them. And that contract was like a month-long project in Connecticut. And I went from being on the team to being the project lead. And then I liked being the leader of it, right? Because it had a whole different thing attached to it. Like I get to go talk to people and help them understand what's going on and why we're changing their computers. And I was like, I like this too. So anyway, I wound up in project management shortly after that, but still kind of hands-on IT. And then I worked my way into management roles, and I was on my way to a director position I was thinking about applying for with no degree. And then I realized I hate this job. I didn't like being in management either.
Huh. So it was first because it was new.
Yeah. Like as I went into each role, again, I was always finding the thing that wasn't working and making it better. That was the part of every job I loved. Right. But getting into management made me feel like I was a babysitter. And I wasn't that soft, coddling leader. I would tell people the truth. And I realized people don't like that. I got a lot of respect from the senior leaders on I used to work for Bayer Pharmaceuticals. The president of the site would travel to Germany and then call me over because I was the client services manager. So I managed the help desk, desktop, and training. And he'd bring me chocolate back from Germany, and people couldn't understand why. Why is Paul doing that? I'm like, because he likes me, because I don't BS him. So I learned that too, right? And then I quit corporate altogether and went back to school because I was making like 30,000 or 20,000 a year. And I was in my early 30s, and my aunt said I wouldn't make any money. It was like, okay, now I can go get my degree.
Makes it real money.
Right. Not quite how it worked. I got my bachelor's and my master's, my bachelor's in English lit and my master's in writing. And guess how much money I made when I graduated?
Yeah. With
I went into adjunct teaching.
I'm going to say it must be tens of dollars.
Right. I think at one point I was making $9,800 a year.
Well, Glodean, you know what my undergraduate degree was in, right?
Same thing.
Yeah, literature.
Yeah.
And here we are. It's interesting. Just as an aside, I remember when I was in college and I was trying to figure out. First of all, I was going to be a musician, so sort of that. When I was trying to figure out what kind of career I wanted to go into, I remember talking to somebody. It was one of those conversations that went by very quick, but it had a huge impact. He said he was a fellow student. His father was a really successful business guy. And he said, my dad says that if you get a degree in literature, you can go into any field, because if you learn how to interpret, how to take in and interpret ideas and express your own, you can bring that to anything. And that was what made me decide to be a lit major.
Really?
Absolutely true. And I ended up, being one of the few who in some way, actually did go on to monetize an actual lit degree, like writing books and shit like that. But
wow.
But no, I have found that just learning how to communicate in a written form and also in a spoken form really gives you a great advantage, because so few people pay attention to that. They get so focused on developing a particular skill, in some applied way, which is, I'm not saying that's bad.
Right.
Also learned how to how to interpret ideas and communicate their own, they'd be much better at whatever it is they did.
So true. And so how I wound up doing what I'm doing. I did lit because I like to read. And if I was I figured if I'd quit a job to go back to school, I wanted to do something I was going to enjoy. I hadn't even thought about like, what am I going to do afterward? And I wound up teaching, especially after I got my master's. Like people were like, what are you going to do with the master's in writing? Teach? And I was like, no, I don't want to teach. And what did I do? I wound up at a high school teaching. I loved it. I love the kids. I love like seeing their faces when they got something and sharing my life with them. And we talk about, things. And then I went into being a professor because I took one of those high school kids out in the hallway to have a conversation with him. He was a Black kid and he was in class, what I would call clowning. Like he wasn't paying attention on purpose. He was distracting the class. And I knew he was smarter than that. So I took him out in the hall to have a conversation with him. And I knew that when I lifted him up so that we could talk face to face, probably was going to be my last job teaching, but it wasn't. He loved it. He knew I cared. He came to class from then on and
so
participated.
You like grab him by the cuff, and lift him up off the floor.
I kind of took the scruff of his shirt. I pulled him up like this. I knew I was going to get fired. I was sure I was going to get fired.
Yeah. So just to be clear for folks listening, I mean, Glodean, you are not what one would call a dainty, petite little. So I'm trying to imagine from this kid's perspective. I could see that would have gone either way. That would have either been your last moment as a teacher, or you changed that kid's life in a positive way.
It changed his life in a positive way.
Yeah.
He actually, the funniest part was watching his eyes get bigger as he got higher up the wall. So by the time we were eye to eye, I had his full attention.
I bet you did.
But it made me realize that maybe I was brought here to teach just because of the instant connection that I made with teaching. And it didn't matter who the students were, because even when I got at the college level, obviously I wasn't, having to connect with them that way.
Right.
But I realized that I did the right thing. I didn't make a lot of money. That's what brought me back into corporate America, but I loved teaching. And I realized that that was clearly part of my focus. And then I wound up at a debt collection agency. And again, came in to be a technical writer because I thought I'd forgotten I had corporate experience. So I took a job as a tech writer because I thought that was going to be fun. Can you see my face? I thought that was going to be fun.
I don't think anybody's ever taken
that's right.
a tech writer because they thought it was going to be fun.
I thought it was. Anyway, yeah. So the CIO wanted to build a corporate compliance department and asked me if I wanted to help. And again, I was like, of course. And then we built this department and hired people and got it all structured. And then I was like, okay, now what do I do?
So I'm trying to imagine you, given that last story you told, as a corporate compliance person.
I know.
Pulling people out into the hallway by the scruff of the neck, lifting them up off the floor, looking them in the eye.
The rules.
In a debt collection agency.
I know. Okay.
So then, but there's the common thread that I'm hearing so far is that whatever you were given up until that point, you figured out some way to elevate it into something that became interesting to you by really kind of picking it apart and then understanding it and taking it to a higher level.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. And then the company hired a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. And I think it was during his, not the interview process, but like once he had gotten the job, he asked, there was like I think he said there was 8 execs in the room, and he asked them, who is the person who has good rapport with the employees and gets things done? And 7 of the 8 said Glodean. So we got partnered up to become the process optimization team. And Pete Berg was the best leader I've ever had, ever, hands down. He was, he taught me servant leadership. What he did was he helped me recognize that I was born to do this work.
And he was the Six Sigma black belt.
Master black belt. He was like badass. I mean, seriously. He went through the GE Lean Six Sigma training. So he embodied all of this, all of like the love process, servant leadership, knowing that it's not about him. So he was the first leader that I worked for that didn't try to put me in a box or have me like conform to corporate structure, because I really should have probably never been in corporate. If I had followed my first mind, I would have been a comedian and we probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But we worked together for a couple of weeks, and then we did our first Kaizen event. And the Kaizen event is when you pull people in the process that are in different business units together, no more than 10 people. And it's and then you have them map out the current state of their process. And then we teach them Lean Six Sigma methodology so they can understand, we do root cause analysis, and we do what's called a SIPOC to help them really understand how the process, the basics of the process. But we teach everything we do, we teach as we do it. And he told me the Friday before our Kaizen event, this was my first one, mind you, he goes, okay, on Monday, you're going to watch me. And then on Tuesday, you're going to do. And I was like, what? I don't even know what we're doing. So Monday he came in, he told them what we were doing. And on Tuesday, about, I don't know, we started at 8:00 every morning and usually wrapped up about 5:30 or 6. About 10 o'clock, he goes, all right, what do you want to do? And on that day, there's this thing called the 5 whys. Right. So I said, I'm going to do the 5 whys. And he said, are you sure? This was a learning lesson for me. When someone says, are you sure? When you volunteer for something, you might want to think twice about it. He goes, are you sure? And I go, yeah, how hard could it be?
So the 5 whys simply is you answer a question, you ask why to that, and you do that 5 times.
Yeah, not quite that easy.
Right.
Because what you're trying to do is get to the root cause of an issue, right? So I like to use the example of like a car, a fan belt breaking. So, but when I went over to the team, I had no idea. Like I didn't understand the strategy behind it because it's not really that simple. So I'm saying why, and one of the issues had really been answered 2 questions in, but I just kept saying why because I didn't understand how to listen for the answer. And I got to about the 8th why, and I went in my head. I go, wait a second, this is called the 5 whys, not the 10 whys. I'm like, Pete, help. And this is what I love about him, because I know that I've worked for other leaders that would have embarrassed me in front of them, right? They would have like taught them what I did wrong, and I would have been standing there feeling shamed. And he instead laughed and then said, come with me. And we stepped outside and he explained it. And he said, now, I let you do it because you said, how hard can it be? And I wanted you to see how hard it can be. But you did a great job because you have recognized. I mean, he lifted me up while he was helping me learn. And then he said, now, when you go back in, this is what you need to do. He didn't take over from me. He let me fix what I had kind of taken sideways.
Right. And just to be clear, he lifted you up metaphorically, not by the scruff.
Right. Not by the shirt. Although he could have lifted me up by the shirt. Yeah. We were like the same height, but he was like a weightlifter. So yeah, he could have probably had me like this.
Turned you around, sent you back in.
Yeah, he just let me go.
Proverbial horse, basically.
Say that last part.
Back on the proverbial horse.
Back on the proverbial horse. And then after that, every day I taught something. And the other thing was, I forgot to say this, he did give me a book, a Lean Six Sigma toolkit. And I read that book over the weekend. So I had a general understanding. enough to be dangerous, obviously. But the cool thing was we went through the whole week of this Kaizen. I'd never worked so hard in my life because it wasn't about me. It was about uplifting every team member in that room, helping them understand their process, helping them understand why it's important to make it more streamlined. And every day they had what we call a report out. So the leadership team would come in and then they would talk about what they learned, what we're doing next, and kind of what you learned, what you did, what you learned, and what you do differently. And then at the end of the week, they did a final report out where they basically walked leadership through the entire new process map. So every day the leaders could come in and they would see like this huge butcher paper on the wall. It covered up the whole conference room wall with all these Post-it notes on it. That was the current state. And then on the other wall would be the future state and all the artifacts of everything that we did in the process of getting to that point. They would build like proposed solutions to help make the process better. And then we would estimate, okay, now that we've done all this, how much waste have we saved? How have we made the process better? So like, I think one of the ones we did, it took forever. We had this one box that we called the Tiffany Circle of Doom, because it was one part of the process just kept going like this if nobody took action. The other thing I loved about it was that everybody being in the room, they understood like, oh, if I don't do my part, they can't do their job. Or, it helped them understand that this was a team process, not a me process, right?
So it's interesting how your natural inclinations converge in this, because from the early days in your work life, you had this natural desire and ability to analyze, pull things apart, understand how they work, elevate it to another level, which is what process work is, right?
Exactly.
The root cause, helping people to figure out what the solution is. But it also came together with your love of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're a teacher and process and putting all that together in an experience in a literal classroom, but now for adult business people,
right,
versus clowns in high school. Not that the corporate world doesn't have its clowns.
Say we had some clowns.
One of them, as a matter of fact. But what an interesting combination of talents that, the creative writing part and the analytical process part of you,
right,
coming together in that way. It's fascinating. I don't have that. I have some elements of the process in me, but the thought of taking clients through that analytical journey, I'm going to say, does not sound like fun to me.
It's so much fun.
I would love to be on the receiving end of it, but if I had to facilitate it, it's just not part of who I am. But it is part of who you are.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most rewarding things I could have ever found in my life.
What do you find rewarding about it?
Because at the end of every Kaizen event, I see a whole different group of people. People come into the room feeling like their leaders, their voices don't matter, their leaders aren't going to listen to them. What are we making these changes for? And then they walk out and they're like, we own this process. We can fix it whenever we want. And not in an arrogant way, though. And then they care about each other, right? They came in the room, they were all individuals. I just got my job to do and you do your job. They come out of the room, they're like, no, we have to do this together. We're all in this together. Now I understand why so-and-so never takes vacation, because if we don't do our part, which some of them weren't doing their part, this other person had to work harder, right? So seeing that kind of a transformation. And then, the hardest part, I picked the two hardest things in the world to teach people, process and love. But anyway, there would be leaders that resisted the change, right? So they made our job a little bit harder. And Pete was that take you in the office and lift you up by your tie guy, right? He taught me well. he knew how to handle those kind of leaders, like, right? And he did it the same way I would have done it. He wasn't that, let's coddle you and I'm gonna coax you into cooperating. He wants to, what is this? What is about this that's threatening to you right now? Like, we want to move through this because you're impacting your team. Because all we cared about were the employees. And I think that was the thing that I loved, is that those leaders that started out that way and had to be coached by Pete, by the end of that Kaizen event, seeing that their teams working together, seeing that at the end, we shaved off 68% of waste. So a process that took almost a month to complete now takes maybe 2 weeks, one and a half, 2 weeks. Those leaders were the best leaders for their teams after that, because
go through that, they had to internalize it, come to terms with it, get through their own resistance to it.
Exactly.
And is there a common theme? Have you noticed a common theme as to why these folks are resistant?
Yes, because they believe that process works best when it's pushed from the top down. So I'm the leader, I know best. I'm going to change your process. I'm not going to talk to you about what I'm changing. And you're going to do it, which 9 times out of 10 people don't, because they know if they do that, it's probably not going to work. It's also, I think sometimes leaders feel like they're being encroached upon. This is my kingdom. What are you doing coming in here trying to change something? And the other thing is, and I think this quickly makes leaders that think this way realize their challenges that they're having with their teams in the first place, when they don't believe that their teams know the process. Like, the process better than they do, and they work in it every day. Okay, help me understand that part.
This is another variation on the theme. If it's not my idea, I'm the boss, I'm the leader. So if I'm not generating the solution, then what value, people are going to think that I'm not valuable.
Exactly. You took that last one right out of my mouth.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've seen in resistance coming from the top, which always strikes me as being like the ultimate irony, right? That the people who say they want change tend to be in higher levels of leadership. And oftentimes the people who resist that very change the most are the people in higher levels of leadership. Oftentimes the people actually writing the check to make the change happen. And I think what happens for a lot of them is, for people in that category, is they don't understand in the beginning that change that they're asking for oftentimes is going to start with them changing in some particular way. And it was like, wait a minute. Exactly. I wanted to change. And I think, the way that I've described that phenomenon is, when a leader gets into that position, essentially what they're saying is, I don't want to.
Right.
I don't want to. You can't make me. I'm fine the way I know. It just becomes very
it's like this.
It's like just juvenile almost. But what I'm hearing from you is, when you coach somebody through that resistance, wherever it comes from, and they come out the other side, oftentimes those are your greatest supporters.
Sometimes I can't. Like, I've learned, one of the things Pete took, because we do these events, or we do different Lean Six methods through the organization, trying to improve process. And I'd see leaders behave badly, and then I'd be complaining, and he would go, you don't get to be surprised by this anymore.
Right.
You don't get to be surprised. You get to pick your battles. You either want to coach them because they're coachable, or you recognize that they're not coachable and you leave it alone. That was the hardest thing for me, because I want to fix everybody. I want everybody to, why are you being so difficult? You don't have to be. It's not this complicated, but I have learned to pick my battle. So it's not.
So what, to paraphrase the great philosopher, Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it?
Everything.
You're a love person. You're a process person. Put the two of those things together.
Everything. This is all love. Okay. You recognize I could talk about this all day, right?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I recognized early on in this journey that I have been on in process is that processes are usually broken because communication and accountability is broken in an organization, right? People aren't talking to each other. People aren't being held accountable for their process. Sometimes people don't even know the process. It's not ever been written down, right? So you come on a job and somebody says, this is how you do this job. And then the next person comes on, that person teaches them, but they figured out a better way to do it. So they teach them their way of doing it. And then over time, you've got 10 people doing the same job 10 different ways. So some people get it done in an hour and others take 2 hours because that's how long it used to be. The problem with that is that it leads to frustration. When people aren't talking to each other, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And for some reason in business, people think that's a good thing. Like, don't tell the other business units what you're doing. Just change this thing and go about your business. No. When you care about people, and agape love is having love of humanity, right? So when you care about people, you want to make sure that their jobs are easy so that they can go home at night and be with their families and that they're not working all the time. When you care about people, you communicate with those people when things are going to change so that they're not worrying about or make a mistake because they didn't know something changed. Because typically what will happen is a leader will make a change and then not communicate it down the business line. And then somebody will make a terrible mistake that will lead to like a customer having a conniption. And then no one still talk to each other. Now they're making another change because the customer complained and the person that made the mistake winds up in trouble or maybe gets fired. That's not love, especially when you know that you made a change that if you had told this person, right? So to me, here's the perfect way to say it. You wouldn't have a child that you didn't tell you loved on a regular basis and hold accountable and expect them to go out into the world and do great things, right? My mom held me accountable in all sorts of ways, told me she loved me every single day. And I can't say that I've gone out into the world to do great things, but no, I can say I've done some really good things. But I wonder how my life would have been different if I didn't have that, right? If she didn't hold me accountable and she didn't tell me that she loved me. Now, of course, in business, it's not quite to that extreme, but if you don't, so sometimes showing your employees that you love them is simply having a sheet of paper that says, hey, this is how you do your job. But if you see something on this sheet of paper as you're doing the job and you think you can make it better, have at it. Like, I feel like the people that work for Toyota or companies that have they're building major tools, if you will, that could take someone's life, like a car. Toyota gives their employees the right to stop the assembly line if they see a problem and fix it. They don't have to get a supervisor or a leader to come talk to and negotiate whether or not this needs to happen. And they're building cars that could kill people. In business, you're providing a service or a product. It's not going to kill somebody. So why can't you give your people the autonomy to be innovative and make things great? To me, that's love. I mean, I could go on about that, but
yeah, it's interesting because the stereotype is that process people, and I'd put engineers in that category, scientists in that category, that this love concept is really foreign to them. And in my experience, it's not true, because they may not think of it. Sometimes there's a little bit of language translation that has to happen, but there's a great deal of love for the process, for the technology, for the impact that we're having. And when you apply that internally to the dynamics of a culture, giving something as simple, what does love look like in business? That's what, as you know, what my work is really all about, making that translation, a clear process with the ability and the autonomy to change it, to make it better. That's one way of saying I love you, particularly to a
Exactly.
process-oriented person, right? 'Cause nothing makes a process person crazier than a shitty process.
Whew, can you say it again?
So to
The
say,
other thing is, I think the other thing is people don't understand that this is how I've rephrased it. Bad processes are what I call revenue thieves, right? Because a bad process, you can see that you're not making revenue through a sales pipeline. That's obvious. But you can't see that you're wasting resources and you're leaving money on the table because you have a process that's all cockeyed. That's the silent thief taking your profits. You're wondering where your profits are going. Well, because you'd be able to sell 10 more of these things if people weren't doing them 10 different cockeyed ways.
right.
Sorry.
Worked up about this, you process person.
You know what I also love about being in process? I love telling people I'm a Six Sigma black belt because they go, what? What's that? They think I'm in martial arts. Like, she's a badass in martial arts. I'm like, no, process. What? You're not in process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is that kind of badass, for people who are not familiar with the terminology, Six Sigma black belt is what's the layman's interpretation?
So a Six Sigma black belt, well, I'll just say Six Sigma is a process improvement methodology that eliminates waste and variation out of process. So you can start with a white belt, which just gives you the basic understanding of it, up to a master black belt, which I actually decided I'm going to get my master black belt this year so that I can teach and create new black belts in companies and then go away.
Yeah. There's people like me with no belt and no pants oftentimes. All right. So the shorts just
Shorts, okay, good.
elastic.
I thought of that news anchor. Remember that news anchor that had his jacket on, but just his...
Right. Yeah, definitely don't want to give you the wrong image there. So I get that, but then the other part that of your life that you're focusing on right now, in addition to doing your great, training and consulting work around process, and I'm just imagining, being in the classroom to do a process, the corporate classroom to do a process improvement thing with you as the facilitator. I'd sign up for that like yesterday. And you know what I am as far as process goes, right? But that sounds like fun. And then there's this whole other endeavor that you're on, which is about bringing more love into the world that you're doing through your social media and in other ways. So just talk a little bit about that.
Definitely wasn't my intention. I'm going to say this was my calling because I was led to it. When George Floyd was murdered, my cousin called me and said, they're rioting in my neighborhood. And I was like, why? She's like, what do you mean, why? Haven't you been watching the news? No. So I found out about George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all in the same within 24 hours. I was heartbroken, and I have for probably most of my 20s and 30s, I was very active in the Black community and trying to make change. So I felt like I had let my community down because I had no idea what was happening. And I thought, I got to do something. All right, really, Glodean, what can you do? And then it occurred to me, I can be love. Like, I could do that. That's easy, right? I can show love. I can be love. I can teach love. I'm going to do that. So I went on Facebook and I was like, all right, this is what happened. And I'm annoyed and blah, blah, blah. And I said my piece. And then I realized at some point in the text, in the post, that I had said something about Black Lives Matter. And then I had this thought, if somebody says all lives matter, I'm going to have a fit. So I went back and I corrected it. And I wanted to be very explicit about why I said Black Lives Matter, not the movement, the people. And one of my friends called me and said, that post made me cry. And I was like, why? And she said, because I could feel your love, not just your love of the Black community, but your love for people, like you really wanted people to understand what you meant, but you said it in a loving way. And then I was like, because I'm going to share love. That's who I'm going to be from now on. So that was June 2nd, and June 3rd, I started on this, what I was calling my love movement. I think I was calling it that. And I was going around like just randomly telling people in my community. Then I live in Monterey, so I was just walking by people, I love you. And they'd be like, what? Or I'd go to Starbucks and I'd, give I want to pay for the 10 cars behind me. Or I'd go to my favorite cafe. I walked in one day and I handed the guy a $100 bill and I said, buy everybody lunch. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, and tell him to pay it forward. I was like, you're going to go broke doing this. Like, you can't do this every day. And what impact are you making? And I was like, well, it's making me feel good. I'm sure it's going to make somebody else feel even greater. And then and then I was trying to figure out what are you trying to do here? And so I came up with this. I was trying to work through it. And then I was talking to Brian Stevens, and I had the first part, like
Who's
the let love.
Mutual friend of ours, right?
Yes. And I had come up with the first part. Like, I knew that love, in order for this to work, people needed to love, learn, listen, and lead. I didn't know how that was going to work together, and he said, let's figure it out, whatever. And then I said, let love. And he said, lead us. And I was like, that's it. So then I started on this let love lead us. And every day I was posting messages about love. But that felt like a moment in time. Like, all of this felt like a moment in time. Because people resist love, not just in business, Steve. People resist that word love because they think romantic love. It's like, that's the only love people know, when there's 3 other loves, right? There's the storge, which is your friends and family, and philia, which is, or your friends, and then philia is family. But it's the agape love people don't understand. It's just the love of humanity. So then I was like, you need to teach people what this means by leading by example. So I came up with the love method. Right. Okay. Because I remember you saying, I'm not in the convincing business. And I was like, but I need to be in the convincing business, because that's the only way that people are going to understand why extreme leadership is important, why love in business is important, why process is important, letting your people do that. They need to understand why love is important. So then I was like, oh, I've already got the framework. I've got the learn, the listen, the lead. So what if I changed the word into that 4-letter dastardly word into 4 words? So then it was like, okay, the L's are interchangeable. Listen, learn, and lead open-mindedly with vulnerability and empathy. And then I was like, I'm going to build a program.
There's a process in there somewhere.
It's a process. It is actually a process.
Yeah.
And I just incorporated extreme leadership, the training, into it, because I felt like, how can I teach people extreme leadership if they don't understand the first part? If you don't understand how to cultivate love because your brain is stuck on the fact that you're going to be eliciting a sexual harassment lawsuit, then you can't do the rest of the stuff. So if you learn that maybe love is just as simple, listen open-mindedly, meaning that you're hearing what your employees are saying without judgment or trying to make them wrong, open to new ideas. You're willing to be vulnerable, which is to say, I don't know. It's just that simple. And show empathy, because I have decided that vulnerability and empathy are best friends. They work together. Because vulnerability, even though the definition makes it this really scary thing that people want to avoid because it could put you in harm's way. But what if you think about it this simply? Being vulnerable really just means that you're willing to share your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs without fear. And empathy allows the other person to receive your vulnerability. See how they work together? Mm-hmm. Then it's not scary. Now, granted, I have been vulnerable my whole life. I don't have a problem saying I don't know something, or I made a mistake, or sorry, I did break that. Because you know why? I used to get in trouble when I lied to my mother.
Well, the other thing that it it says to me is vulnerability is the way I am willing to be with you. Empathy is the way I'm going to respond to you and understand you, which allows you
to do the same.
Vulnerable.
Exactly.
The more empathy I have for you, the more you're going to be willing to tell me your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs.
Exactly.
So it's a beautiful kind of virtuous cycle.
Exactly. That's why they should be best friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
They should travel together. One should not be vulnerable without empathy close by.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because otherwise you're saying, let me tell you all about me and my, my deepest, darkest moments, but I don't really give a shit about you.
Exactly.
So it's the all about me thing.
Yeah.
I'm so vulnerable. Look at me, how great I am in my vulnerability.
Right. It doesn't work. So that's the love part of it, right? Because also, if the sooner we get that it's not about us, right? That it's about the other person, the better.
Exactly.
It took me a long time to get here, but now I'm here.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a very powerful place, Glodean, because that combination of love, empathy, compassion, vulnerability, all of that, those personal characteristics combined with the process work, the analytic, right? That's just it's a very powerful combination, because that's the way we're wired as human beings. We're not purely emotional. We're not purely analytical. We've got elements of both. Right. And business, there's that old saying, which is a total crock, which is, it's not personal, it's business. Nothing. It's not personal, it's business. You're fired. It's not personal.
It is personal.
Of course it's personal. If somebody gets, if I get fired and I go home and I say, honey, I got fired, but it's nothing personal. But I can say, I understand why, and I understand what happened, and it feels personally terrible, but I get it. Well, that's the way we always are. There is the part of us that wants to understand and pick it apart, and there's the part of us that just responds.
Right.
And by using a process to say to people through that process, I love you, I care for you, I value you as part of this team, is just a really powerful combination.
Yes. And I've seen it work. I mean, and that's the thing. I think I used to feel like it used to be really painful when the leaders go rogue on you, right? Because you're trying to help them. Because I feel like if you've got a C in your title, you should be at the strategic level, driving the company toward greater profits so that your people can do their tactical stuff.
Yeah. So
it always hurts when I feel like the leaders go rogue. But then I have to remember the employees, though. That's what you're here for, because they're going to, at some point, as experience has proved, they're going to at some point go, this is my process. And I'm going to help my leader understand that this is my process. And then they hold the leaders accountable. It's a beautiful thing, because then the leaders have to come around, because it's not me by myself going, you should behave better. It's the team going, hey, we got this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, of course, we've been saying this for decades. The people doing the work are the most, they're the ones you need to tap into, because they know what works and what doesn't work.
Exactly.
So kind of intellectually we get it, but then it all becomes really personal. That's the point of this whole thing.
Yeah.
So you're doing amazing work, Glodean, and I just got to say, because it's part of our tradition, you and me, in our relationship, I just got to say this: gloating. Anyway, I can't think your name without singing that song. I didn't want to let this interview go by without.
I appreciate it. I would have felt some kind of way if you didn't.
So one last thing before we bring this in for a landing, going all the way back to your Master of Fine Arts in writing.
Yes.
That part of you is also expressing itself in your novel that's coming out. So just say a few words about that.
This is a total labor of love. And it's called Salmon Croquettes because that was like a time-honored traditional meal in my family. When my mom made salmon croquettes, forget it. Like, you know. So it just makes me happy to think about that. But the story is of a young girl, a young Black girl, she's 12, struggling with her sexuality. Because when I was in undergrad, when I was at Mills, there were a lot of girls that were struggling with their sexuality. And this was at the time when AIDS was kind of not as popular, but there was, in the Black community, a lot of deaths were happening, especially in the South, where wives were getting AIDS from their husbands. And it made me start thinking, like, how many people are not being true to themselves? Black people are not being true to themselves because of the stigma of homosexuality. Like, I've never struggled with anything but my weight in my life, but I wanted to understand how that could feel for someone in their early 20s or even younger. Like, and I know that the stereotype around homosexuality was that you were traumatized, and that's how come you chose to be that way. So I wrote Zayla's story as someone who was born feeling different in her skin. And the story kind of takes you on her journey. And then she lives in Watts, because I used to live in Watts when I was in high school. And it was a strong Black community where people looked out for each other. So that was the community I wanted to recreate. And then the Watts riots happened, because I feel like that history was kind of mistold, as if Black people was like the hottest day of the summer and Black people just went crazy. That's not what happened. So I wanted to kind of set the record straight in my novel.
And when is it publishing?
It should be out the end of March.
End of March.
The 24th, to be exact.
March 24th, 2021. Because you never know when somebody's listening to this podcast, right? It could already be a New York Times bestseller by the time.
Yeah. Thank you, from your mouth to God's ears.
Well, I have not read it yet, obviously, but I can't wait. I can't wait, because your voice is so unique in everything that you do. Glodean walks into a room and you notice. There's a shift in the force. There's just an electricity in the air. It's like, oh, Glodean must be here. So I'm just imagining the power of your voice in a fictional format as well. It's very cool.
Thank you.
Glodean, thanks so much for spending this time with us. And I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody did. And for people that want to stay in touch with you, what's the best way?
The best way is to either go to GlodeanChampion.com or find me on Facebook. And then I've been forced to be on Instagram now. So you can find me on Instagram too. Excellent.
We'll put the links in the show notes and the transcript and all of that. Awesome. So you'll be easy to find. You're easy to see. Now you'll be easy to find. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Yeah, thank you, Glodean. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Love is Just Damn Good Business with Steve Farber. Join us again next time, because when customer and employee satisfaction just isn't enough anymore, we are here to back you up with specific ideas to operationalize love to make an enormous difference in your business, personal life, and the world around you. Visit our website at stevefarber.com to leave a review. And don't forget to share the love with your colleagues and friends, because after all, it's just damn good business.